teaching my boy here, who doesn't really want to be on video, so I'll be nice and leave his face away from it. My long-haired child here had to follow in his father's footsteps and grow his hair out, which is cool by me. He's a good-looking kid. But getting him out here, teaching him how to do some of this stuff, getting him fabricating too. So he's learning how to use the chop saw and cut me a couple pieces of angle iron. That's right, lock it in. You got it. Line it up on the blade. Now lift it off the metal before you, there you go, good. Start it up. There we go. And remember, keep your hands away from it till the blade stops. Then pop it out, spin it around, and lock it in for the next cut. Good job, dude. So along with my buddy Max, my son here. So right here we're getting into just finishing up putting in the fuse box. My boy over there cut these parts out, and I've welded them in place. So we got this flap and a bolt going through here. And we got this flap coming down and a bolt going through here. Now it's going to hold our fuse box nice and steady underneath the seat and lock it in place. I'm sure it's going to rub a little back. Maybe not. Maybe a little bit of it over here into the bottom of the seat, but we'll have to see how that fits. Shouldn't be too bad. Got a little give in the bottom. But snug right up. Did well. Pretty happy with how it's fitting in. A lot of this stuff's starting to kind of come together. Mad vision seems to be taking place. Becoming a whole that we can actually see working someday, maybe in the future. I'm sure there's a lot of hiccups and a lot more to come along the way, but we're getting there. Gonna do a little bit of wiring today. We've got our radiator fan fuse link here. We're gonna mount that up onto this spot so it's up and accessible, and somehow mounted in off of that bolt, probably like that. And then beyond that, run the two radiator fan connections. So we're gonna splice these up, extend their length, and run them to where they connect in here and over on the far radiator fan there, and get them all hooked up so they're ready to go. That's our next little diddly-do here. All right, that boring bit of high-speed video there gets us to the point where we've clipped down our ambient temperature sensor, shortened its wiring, wrapped it, tied it all up. Looks like we lost a piece here. I have to retie that up. That's an unknown. And then we've brought the fuse link for the radiators up here and mounted it in place on its post, and zip tied things back down together, wrapped all the radiator cables together. It's all temporary zip tied on. I'm gonna tap a screw here for the ground, right into the frame at this point. And then that leads right up the back side of this. It's all tied in. We redid the switch. Those of you who are watching closely probably noted that we flipped the black and blue wires, and back at the beginning of the second line, we flipped the white and blue wires. And if you saw that testing I was doing with the battery with the red lines, basically making sure that I'm switching the polarity on these DC motors on the fans so that they spin in reverse of what they normally spin, so that they're pushing air from this side out the back. Before, the way this radiator was hooked up was flipped the other way, and so it was pulling air through the radiator and in. So I had to flip the polarity on these fans. So that's why those wires were switched up, if you noticed that. And if you didn't, well, that's how you do it. You put the positive to the negative and the negative to the positive. And that switches the polarity and makes the fan spin the opposite direction. So that's what we did. So now our fans will be pushing air out the back. It's not perfect, but it's better than it was and it works good enough. So there we have it. We'll do a little cut snips on some of these extra long zip tie tails, get them out of the way. But right now we've got our radiator and our ambient temperature sensor gauges or sensors hooked up and done. And now we can move to something else. Anyway, I figured today what I'm gonna work on, getting stable here, is the finishing out of these steering parts. I'm gonna take that arm right there and get another ball joint that fits in the end of both of these, one on each side here. And then we can get figuring out making a mount so that we can lock these permanently in place going straight and complete the disablement of this steering for this section. And that will get us to another point, which is down the line, if this thing needs to travel, being able to hook up the tow bar and just tow it down to someplace would be really beneficial. And without these wheels flopping all over everywhere, would be even better. So that's where we're headed next. So I'm gonna pull a little cotter pin from the bottom and start figuring out unbolting that ball joint right there, and get that arm out so we can take it down to the auto parts store and try and find the pieces we need. Yay, fun. So that's that. Got that out, and we'll hammering some pry bar action, a little banging. Now we removed that arm from there, and take this down to the shop and ask those boys at the parts shop if they can give us a ball joint end with an 8-inch thread arm on it, so that we get enough room to reach from here to where we're going to hook up a little frame piece right off the end of that and line this up and bolt it into place, and that'll give us our adjustment to be able to hook this bad boy in. And that's where we're going next. So we're back on the VW, working on this lockout for the steering. So here's the old connection, and here's the new part. So they didn't have anything perfect for what we wanted to do, so we've had to do a little fabrication here. So we've got a sleeve that we're going to use here and a bolt, and I'm going to weld that bolt to the end, and that's going to make our piece so that we can crank it in and out. And then this sleeve's there to give it some extra strength when we weld it together. And that, there you guys. It's going to bring our rod up here so that it can be bolted into a plate that we're going to weld in right there. And that'll lock in and hold this going straight. And it won't move it anymore. So that's our plan. So here's the 3 parts that we're going to be putting together. We'll crank them up into the vise and then get started. Okay, we're all set up. Wasn't quite in perfectly there. Now we're going to go on the move. Weld this thing in place. Okay, so welded up, a little ground back to clean it up. There is the part we've created by welding the bolt to the end of that. And I've already installed this one over here. Sorry if the lighting kind of sucks, but hopefully you guys can kind of get the idea. So there it is, screwed in. And then it goes up and it's going to mount into this little plate you see right here is going to get welded on to right there, and this will mount right into that plate, sitting right about there. So from down here, you see how we right up kind of floating in that space just underneath there. And that'll give us our lockdown to keep these rear wheels going straight. If I could ever figure out how to aim the camera someday. Someday, maybe. Doubtful, but someday. Anyway, that's the way those are going in, so you can see that just screws right into the end. Stick in the other one here for you guys. Woo! I'll get flung around as I do this awful video in here. So you see this one's right here hanging out. And this piece just screws right in all the way down until it's tight. And that actually get us just to where we're either dead on straight or maybe just a little bit with the front end of the tire kicking out some, which would mean just cranking this out a tiny bit in order to push the back end out. And see, that one comes up and bam, right here. And there's its little plate waiting to be welded. And that's where we're at. That's our next bit. Moving on to getting those locked in. I may have messed up the electrical on this, but mechanical I'm pretty hopeful I'm doing okay. I shouldn't brag. I'm going to burn this whole thing to the ground, I'm sure of it. Alright, today we're going to do a couple little things. I'm going to be pulling the radiator out of the way and pulling the exhaust out of the way so we can get to our receiver hitch part, so we can weld on a plate, so we can attach the old steering arm and lock out the rear steering on these back tires, finally. So that's one job. We're gonna get through that, pulling all those things out of the way. Then the other thing we're gonna do is, if we can get to it, we're gonna pull the shifter out, disconnect its front bracket there, pull the whole cable system back to this point, and refeed it through in a different way. Down underneath the hump instead of over the hump there in that hole. We're gonna go down through the bottom opening instead of the top one. Take a little bit of that flex out of that. Maybe slide the whole unit forward by an inch or so because of that. And then work on trying to tilt this shifter forward more that way so that the top comes out flat rather than an angle. And redo the bracket that holds it down in the bottom so that we can get to that point. So I think it'd be nicer if it were flat. It'd also make building this hump in the middle console a lot easier if that was flat. So I could go flat from here and then just drop down at each end instead of trying to do some weird curvy thing in the middle. Damn finger in the camera again. I'm never gonna figure that out while I use this phone. This is life for me. Oh well. Anyhow, that's where we're going. So stand back and watch. down there, you see the pipe we welded on. Run that ball joint in, tie it in through there. Same spiel with the one over here. Pretty good, not too bad. So there's a little, everything seems to do reasonably what it should. And nothing's shifting anymore. As far as the steering back here, it's locked out. They're not gonna turn anymore. And they're moderately adjustable with that piece in there. Not be exactly perfect, but it's moderately adjustable. It's the best I got right now, so it's gonna have to be the way it is. Much better than it was. All right, moving on.